On a sunny summer day in Boston, something extraordinary happened in the sky. People in the streets stopped to look up, amazed by what they saw. There, floating over the city, was a rare phenomenon known as a fire rainbow. The vibrant colors and ethereal shapes of the rainbow painted the sky, creating a sight that was both beautiful and surreal. John, an amateur photographer and enthusiast of natural phenomena, was among the spectators. Always in search of unique images for his collection, he quickly grabbed his camera and began capturing the scene. The bright colors of the fire rainbow reflected off the buildings and the river, creating breathtaking compositions in his photos. However, when John reviewed the photos later at home, he noticed something strange. In several of the images, there were shadows and figures that he didn't remember seeing while photographing. The figures appeared human, but had a sinister air, as if they didn't belong to that reality. Intrigued and a bit disturbed, John zoomed in on the images on his computer screen. The figures were indistinct but undeniably present. They seemed to be observing something or someone. He wondered if the reflections and shadows were just a trick of the light, or if there was something more there. With his curiosity piqued, John decided to investigate further. He recalled stories and urban legends he had heard about unusual atmospheric phenomena. Some said that events like the fire rainbow were portals to other dimensions, releasing restless spirits or unknown entities. Others believed that these phenomena were omens of supernatural events. John wasn't someone who easily believed in the supernatural, but the figures in his photos were hard to ignore. Determined to find a logical explanation, he began researching the fire rainbow and possible connections to supernatural events. Little did he know that this investigation would lead him down a dark and dangerous path, where the line between reality and the supernatural would become increasingly blurred. John was obsessed with the strange figures that appeared in the photos of the fire rainbow. He spent hours reviewing the images and looking for clues that could explain the phenomenon. His research led him to a series of historical accounts of similar events occurring in different parts of the world. He discovered that in various cultures, the fire rainbow was considered a harbinger of great catastrophes. Ancient Chinese manuscripts and Native American legends spoke of a similar phenomenon that preceded major natural disasters and periods of chaos. Determined to understand the origin of the figures in his photos, John visited the Central Library of Boston. There, he found a rare book on mythology and supernatural events in New England. The book mentioned an event that occurred in the 17th century when a fire rainbow was seen shortly before a great earthquake devastated the region. As John delved deeper into the reading, he found a specific chapter that spoke of the harbingers of the apocalypse. The text described shadowy figures that appeared in images of unusual natural phenomena, and that these figures were heralds of an imminent apocalypse. John began connecting the dots. What if the fire rainbow he photographed wasn't just a rare atmospheric phenomenon, but a sign that something terrible was about to happen? What if the figures in the photos were messengers of an impending disaster? Determined to understand more, John sought out experts in meteorology and supernatural phenomena. He found a retired anthropology professor, Dr. Richard Halloway, who had spent his career studying myths and legends about disaster omens. John arranged a meeting with Dr. Halloway and showed him the photos. The professor, upon seeing the images, was visibly disturbed. He confirmed that the figures in the photos closely resembled those described in ancient legends about the harbingers of the apocalypse. Dr. Halloway said, These figures are a bad omen. According to the legends, wherever they appear, disasters of apocalyptic proportions follow. You need to be careful, John. This could be much more serious than you imagine. John felt a chill run down his spine. What started as a photographic curiosity now seemed to be a warning of something terrible to come. He knew he needed to warn the authorities, but who would believe stories of supernatural omens? As the days passed, John began to notice subtle changes around him. The weather became increasingly unpredictable, with sudden storms and lightning seemingly appearing out of nowhere. He began having nightmares about shadowy figures and apocalyptic scenarios, feeling that time was running out. With a growing sense of urgency, John decided to document everything he had discovered. He compiled a dossier with his photos, historical accounts, and his findings, preparing to alert the world to what he believed was an imminent apocalypse. John knew that something terrible was about to happen. His research and discoveries pointed to an imminent disaster, and the signs around him only confirmed his suspicions. The storms grew more intense, the nightmares more vivid, and the shadowy figures seemed to be more present in his daily life. Determined to warn the authorities, John went to the police station with his complete dossier. He tried to explain the situation to the detective in charge, showing the photos and historical accounts. But as he feared, his stories about omens and supernatural disasters were met with skepticism and disdain. Detective said, "Look, John, I understand that you're worried, but we can't make decisions based on legends and strange photos. If something is really happening, we need concrete evidence, not horror stories." Desperate, John left the police station feeling powerless. He knew that time was running out, but no one was willing to listen. He returned home, determined to do something on his own. That night, while reviewing his photos once again, he noticed that the shadowy figures seemed to move, almost as if they were coming to life. John felt a chill as he realized that the entity was getting closer. Suddenly, the lights in his house began to flicker. A cold wind swept through the room. Despite all the windows being closed, he heard indistinct whispers and saw shadows moving on the walls. John grabbed a flashlight and tried to follow the shadows, but they seemed to move faster than him. It was then that he saw the figure of a shadowy entity clearly in the corner of the room, near his camera. The entity had glowing eyes and a menacing smile that chilled John's blood. He knew he had to act quickly. John ran to the camera and began to dismantle it, believing that destroying it could close the portal he had inadvertently opened by capturing the fire rainbow photos. But the entity advanced, its whispers turning into deafening screams. John, shouting, said, "You won't get me. I'll close this portal once and for all." In a desperate move, John grabbed a hammer and smashed the camera, breaking it into pieces. The entity let out a high-pitched scream and began to disappear, its shadows dissipating into the air. John fell to the ground, exhausted and gasping for breath, believing he had ended the threat. But as he looked at the remains of the camera, he realized that the figures in the photos were still there, now more distinct than ever. And worse yet, he felt an even stronger presence in the room, as if something much more powerful had been released. John thought he had won, but the battle was just beginning. The shadows were closer, time was running out, and the true confrontation with the apocalypse was about to begin.